couch this weekend and watch Dora'S, now streaming on Netflix. We spoke to the movie's director to find out more.
Costa, it's a pleasure and an honor to actually have you here on set.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, we've had some very interesting stories behind scenes about Dora'S piece. Tell me, how did that come about?
Well, Dora'S piece had a lot of influences, and one of the first ones was the first time I walked into Hillbrow as a young guy coming from a conservative town in Vereeniging, and walking into Hillbrow in the 80s or whatever it was. And it was a very cosmopolitan European kind of a place where the laws of apartheid didn't really apply, right? So coming from a conservative town, you walk in there and you just 24-hour shops, bookshops, music shops. And one of the first times I walked in there, I walked in and I saw this lady who I assumed was a prostitute because she was dressed like a prostitute, like the character of Dora in my movie. And she was calling out to this kid, and she was a black lady. And she was calling out a Greek name. So when I looked, I saw this colored kid run past with a Greek name. And I was like, but how can this be, you know? And then afterwards, when I hung out, I saw these like nice Greek old guys who used to be at the coffee shops and all that, and used to play backgammon and all that, which also kind of forms part of my story as well. They were drinking more than coffee, let's just say, at those coffee shops. So that was an image that stayed, which became ultimately Dora. But it's also influenced by a movie made in the 1980s called Gloria, by a father of independent cinema called John Cassavetes, who was a Greek-American. And he was known for making independent personal films. But then one day his wife, the lead actress in the movie, told him, make this movie for me. And that was a movie about an older lady and the relationship she had with this kid. And that was also an influence. It's a movie shot in New York, 1980. I always considered it a 70s movie because it was that grittiness you had. And that was also an influence. And Hillbrow, because I made this movie with Dora in Hillbrow, because Hillbrow to me has got that grittiness that New York had in the 70s. So that's what I wanted to do. Yeah.
Now, how difficult or easy was it to actually produce this film?
Well, it was very difficult because we started 8 years ago. It took us about a year to write the movie. And then we worked with the National Film Video Foundation to develop it more, and they helped us fund the development process. And that took another year or two, and then finally we had the script, and then it was, you know, a thing of going around trying to find funding. And that took a while, and we had a few false starts, and gladly I didn't go ahead with it because it wouldn't have been as good of a movie. And yeah, before you know it, 8 years have gone past, and struggle for money, basically. You know, we had a great script, people loved it, but putting in the money is always a problem, yeah.
I mean, as a producer, what's the hardest part? Getting started or actually keeping consistency?
Well, both. Getting started and afterwards, you know, I've heard a lot of filmmakers locally and international who will say, after this movie, I won an award at such and such film festival, and I thought everybody would come calling. Well, who's going to come calling? Nobody comes call. Everybody's doing their own movies, and, you know, the studios do their big budget movies. So as an independent filmmaker, it's always a struggle. And it's the funds, you know, that's the problem.
Does commerce tend to interfere with the creativity aspect in producing a film?
It does normally if you work if you're a director for hire or whatever, but with me, what I do now is I have complete control. So I'm the producer and the director and the editor. So I make sure that I have creative control. So whoever comes on board, whether they get a percentage or whatever, I keep the majority percentage so I can keep that creative control. So on this movie, I had full creative control. Of course, you never really have that because being on location brings its own problems, which you have to deal with. So, like they say, if you get 60% of your original vision, you've done well. And I think we did very well with Dora'S.
Have you had times where you've actually had to take 2 steps back with your creativity and say, okay, for the sake of the budget and the movie's production, I'm just going to go ahead and do it?
Well, you have to adapt on set because things happen, you know, problems happen, whether it's weather or something that you wanted that you're not getting, a building, a location, things like that happen over time. So you have to adapt, but you have to try and stick to your vision, but also be open because sometimes you find you go in a new direction and it's actually better. So that's the way. And if you're trying to stick 100% to your vision, it's never going to happen. A lot of people will never get that movie made because, you know, you need to adapt and be open to new experiences and ideas.